When we moved to Waco, Texas, in McLennan County, we lived at 308 Stead Street, on the campus of James Conley Technical Institute, a part of Texas A&M, which was the new college that they were starting for industrial type of training. And Ted was hired to be begin the building construction program for the school. Our neighbors across a dual carport was a major in the Air Force. He was the last officer that was there to close out the air base for the federal government and turn it over to Texas as a college student for students. And he was the very last person in the military to leave the base. But they were nice while we knew them. And Ted was started school right away, September, when classes started, and also our children went to school. Ted Jr. was going into 8th grade at Conley Junior High in the Conley ISD School District, and Alicia would be going to 3rd grade at Elmont Elementary. Elmont was up the highway north towards Dallas a little bit, but in the school district, the elementary schools, there were 3. One was Lacey Lakeview Elementary for that town, one was Northcrest Elementary for Northcrest, and Elmont for the Elmont town and surrounding country. And the kids that lived on the campus there, their streets were divided up to which school they would go to so they wouldn't overload any one of the elementary schools. And the kids that lived on Stead Street were automatically assigned to Elmont. But a school bus picked them up every day, and Ted dropped off at the junior high and then on to Elmont for Alicia. And that worked out well. And in Ted's department, there were 3 men to begin with. Mr. Young, who was in building materials and knew a lot about different kinds of building materials, and Mr. Ricketts, who was had practical experience in building. And so they were with Ted beginning the construction technology. Ted had a chance while he was there to go back to school and work on his degree, because since the school was a part of the A&M system, they were holding classes at night for the people who not finished their degree to have a chance to work on it. So he got to go some during the night to TSTI, to James Conley, to work on his degree, and then Saturdays, a lot of times he would drive to College Station for a class there. And once even, when he was getting near graduation, his advisor at A&M said, "Babb, you still need a class in upper English to get your degree." And he said, "I've checked at Baylor and they don't have anything when you're not working. But Paul Quinn University there in Waco, which was basically for black students, has a class at 5 o'clock on the afternoon in Romance English, and I enrolled you in it. I went ahead and paid it and got you because you need that to graduate this year." So Ted said, okay. So like 2 times a week, he would say, "Don't forget, going this afternoon to Paul Quinn to get romantic." He would tease me about it. But it turned out to be pretty nice, and the teacher seemed surprised when she first saw him because he came in a suit that he was wearing from work. And she said, "Are you from the Southern Association of Accreditation?" And he said, "No, ma'am, I believe I'm a student in this class. I'm Ted Babb." And she looked at her roster and she said, well, okay then, welcome to the class. She had her master's from Duke in English and was a pretty good teacher. And the students did well with Ted. They seemed to like him okay. And then after a while, she got to where she would call on Ted to when she would say something to him, she would say, "Isn't that right, Professor Babb?" And he would say, "Yes, yes, ma'am," And once, then when they did a paper, they had to present a college paper on some subject, and he had it done, and I typed it for him with a cover sheet and the bibliography and all that, and he took it in. And when she came out with the papers that were graded, she held his up as an example and had a big A in red on it. She said, "Now this is college work." And she held up another one that somebody had turned in that was on notebook paper, written about 3/4 of a page and in pencil. And she held it up, and it had a big fat F, and she said, "And this is not college work. Isn't that right, Reverend Babb?" And she called him Reverend instead of Professor, and the guy sitting behind him punched him and said, "You just got promoted." From Professor to Reverend. Well, anyway, that was a funny thing that happened. But he did go on to finish and got his degree in Bachelor of Science from Texas A&M in May of 1970. Well, the kids were doing well in school, but I discovered that there was no music program in the elementary schools. It was only began with 6th grade band when they went to middle school or junior high. And so I talked with the principal at Elmont, Mr. Grissom, about it, and he said, well, they hadn't been able to do that yet. And I said, well, I love the music, and I said, I would be willing to do something on a volunteer basis if it was allowed. And so he decided that we would try it for 6 weeks, and I could come in and do 30 minutes with the 3rd grade, which was what Alicia was in, and the other 3rd grade room with her, while the 2 3rd grade teachers met and had a conference period. And so we tried it for 6 weeks, and it seemed to work out so well that all the other teachers were wanting something. And by the 2nd semester, then I was doing 2 hours every day, 30 minutes with kindergarten, 30 minutes with 1st grade, 30 minutes with 3rd, and 30 minutes with 2nd. And by the next year, they wanted to add the 4th and 5th grades. And then that took another whole afternoon because I gave them each 45 minutes in the 4th and 5th grade. But it worked well. The teachers got a conference period. I was enjoying that. And there was a drop-in daycare in Northcrest that I could leave Angela at when I went and just pay for that day. And she was getting some playtime with kids her age, too. So it was working out well. And the PTA really, their parents liked it, and they asked for a special program. And so in December of that 2nd year, we actually put on a program, and first kindergarten and 1st, singing Jingle Bells and Shaking Little Bells and Up on the Housetop and songs like that. And the 2nd and 3rd had different ones, and the 4th and 5th grade even did Silver Bells in harmony between the boys and girls. And then we finished it all with everybody in the audience singing Silent Night. And that was a well-received program. And that was all volunteer on my part at the schools. One thing happened kind of funny with Ted. He called me one day and he said, "Hey, guess what? I'm bringing somebody home for supper." And I said, "Oh, Ted." I said, "I was just cooking a pot of beans today because I've been to the music program." And he said, "That's all right. He's a good old boy from San Angelo, and he'll love beans." So I was having beans and cornbread, and I threw a salad together with it. And when they came in the door, I said, "Oh, hello, Senator Sims," because it was Bill Sims from San Angelo, who was the local representative, San Angelo, to the Texas state legislature. And actually, he had been in college with Ted and one of the men on the judging team when they went to Houston. And they were good friends. And I said, I didn't know we were having company, and I just cooked a pot of beans today. He said, that's right up my alley. So we ate supper, and he actually took second helpings on everything and said to me, Virginia, that tasted so good. You don't know how many dry chicken sandwiches I've eaten as a representative to state dinners and things that we've had to go to. And this was wonderful to be here with you and Ted and enjoy this meal. So that was kind of interesting. Bill was there because the legislature had sent some of the men to look over the school as it was growing so, and they were considering taking it out of the A&M system and making it a college of its own, which they did, the legislature, and it became Texas State Technical Institute, TSTI as we called it, and that's where it was for a long time then. Ted was happy as program chairman, and he also was happy with the church that we had found. We visited 3 different churches in Waco that were Christian churches, Disciples of Christ. First one that we visited was on Washington and 11th Street in downtown Waco because it was the closest to our house. At that time, the northernmost river crossing in Waco was on Waco Drive. And TSTI was quite a bit further north than that, so it was about a 30-minute drive from TSTI down to 11th Street in Washington. The other 2 churches were out in the west part of town, and it would take about an hour to get from TSTI to Lakewood or from TSTI to Richville. Lakewood was on Boschke and Richville was on Cobbs near Lake Air. And so after we had visited them all, we decided that logistically we would go to the downtown church. And that was where we got involved. Ted with the youth group, and me singing in the choir, the kids in Sunday school, and we had a Sunday school class that was called the Friendship Class. And one Sunday, an older couple were there, and they announced they were visitors. And the preacher said, some of you will remember her as Elizabeth Henderson when she used to play the organ here. And I thought, Elizabeth Henderson, that name is familiar. And it hit me that Ted's mother had said to me one time, her fondest, most favorite childhood friend was a girl named Elizabeth Henderson, and that she had taken music lessons from Old Scout's mother and was a great musician. In fact, she said she went off to college at Baylor, and the last I heard from her, she's an adjudicator in the Baylor School for their music. And I think she plays the organ at the Christian church in Waco. So I thought, that's got to be her, but I'm not sure. But after church, I waited to shake her hand, and I said, I'm Virginia Babb. She said, oh, my dearest childhood friend married a man named Babb. I said, Prudence Bassett Babb. Yes. I said, that was my mother-in-law. And Old Scout was, dead quite a few years by then. A few Sundays later, she came to church, and she brought me pictures of Old Scout and her sister, Mary, and herself as girls about 16 or 17 years old. The only pictures we have had of Ted's mother at that age. And that was a wonderful thing. Well, church went along fine, and things began to be more normal and routine. we would often go back to San Angelo for holidays and times with family. And actually, before we had even been there a whole year, in April of 1969, my grandpa Gus Young died with a heart attack. He was a really fine man. I remember learning a lot from him as growing up, and oftentimes when I would go by their house, I would see him sitting there reading the dictionary. And I said, "Grandpa, you're just reading the dictionary?" And he said, "I'm learning new English words." Because he grew up speaking Swedish and then began to learn English in school. And he also learned Spanish from workers they had on their farm that would come to pick cotton. And so he ended up being very virtual and a good speaker in all three languages by the time he was older. In fact, a lot of times some Hispanic people would get something in English either from the federal government or the state, or maybe even something from school that they didn't know how to read because it was in English, and they would bring it to him to translate for him. And so he would read it in English and translate it into Spanish to tell them what it meant. I remember one thing specifically which is ingrained in my heart, and that was a prayer that he always gave for the meals when we had our meals at his house. He said it in Swedish a lot of times, and we said, "Grandpa, we don't understand that. We just need English." So he translated it, and it went like this: "Heavenly Father, wise and good, we thank thee for our daily food. For all thy care of all our days, we thy children give thee praise." Amen. And that's something I remembered all my life. Well, we did go for his funeral on a Saturday. And I told the kids we were going to leave after school on Friday. So unbeknownst to me, that Friday morning, Alicia fell on the steps of the school bus and hurt her calf of her leg. They went on to school, and it was bleeding, and they took her to the nurse, and she doctored it and put a Band-Aid on it. And when she came home, she told me about it, and I looked at it, and it didn't look that bad. And so we went on to San Angelo for the funeral, and that all took place in family things for Saturday, and Alicia was playing with Linda a lot. And so Sunday, when we drove home, when we got out of the car, Alicia was limping a little. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "It's hurting." I looked at it, and there was red all around. And the next day, we went straight to the doctor, and it was a puncture wound from some strip of metal that had been on the bus that cut her leg. And he gave her a tetanus booster and antibiotics, and she had to stay home from school for about a week, and we had some kind of salve to put on it to help it heal, and it finally did. But it caused her a great deal of pain, I believe. Well, school went along pretty well, and Teddy, although he had not been in the band before, he got a guitar, and he picked that up and started being self-taught with guitar. And about that time, Ted said, "Virginia, I was just looking at our finances. We're only going to have enough money saved to send one kid to college. And Ted's going to be a junior next year. So in 2 years, he'll graduate. Why don't we send you back to college and you get your teaching degree? You'd still have summers off with the kids. And you're spending 3 afternoons at school anyway because you enjoy it so much. We get your degree, and then you can teach, and your second salary can pay for us sending all the kids to college." So he said, "I think that would be a good plan." So I sent for my transcript, and in the fall, then, of 1970, I enrolled Angela in a private first grade because she wouldn't be 6 until November to legally go to first grade. And that was only 2 months short of her getting to go anyway. And then I enrolled at MCC and started on my second year of college towards a teacher's degree. And I even took one course in the summer by correspondence from Texas State in San Marcos, the second half of history that I needed to complete. And could do that while the kids were playing recreation games or swimming at the free swimming pool. And I'd go study on a blanket watching them as they swam. And so Linda came lots of summers and spent a month to 6 weeks with us. And that was fun for her. Once they came home from recreation and said, "We have to go to Waco tonight for a contest." And I said, "What kind of contest?" And Linda and Licious both said, "Frisbee." I said, "Frisbee?" "Yes, we had a Frisbee contest today, and she won one and I won one. And so they want us both to go and represent TSTI in the Waco City thing from all the different elementaries and places, recreation thing." So they go, I meet the director that's taking them all, and there were several kids going in different categories. And when they came home, they both had a ribbon. One of them had won for throwing the Frisbee the longest, had first place, and the other one had first place. I think that was Alicia, for making it skip like a rock, and it went the furthest. Bounced 3 or 4 times before it landed. So that was funny things that happened on the campus. Well, that year after MCC, when I went on to Baylor then to finish my degree, Teddy had turned 16 in August, and he got his driver's license. So he and I shared the car. And I found a lady that was going there, lived nearby, and had some of the same classes that I did. So I made a deal with her, and I could ride for $1 over and back, which helped her with gas money. And Teddy could take the car to school on days that, if it was really needed. If it was raining or something for the kids, and they didn't have to stand in the rain to catch the bus. And only one afternoon a week, I did have a lab from 3 to 5 at Baylor for chemistry. And then Ted would drive to Baylor, and Teddy would drive to Baylor and pick me up. And he'd always have Alicia and Angela in the car with him, unless Ted could get off work a little early in those days. But things went along well, and I did my student teaching at Northcrest Elementary in the Conley system in first grade. And Mr. Crockett gave me a grade evaluation. And in May of that year, Ted Jr., graduated from Conley High School. And I had 2 more classes to take, which I took in the summer. And I graduated from Baylor in August '73. And I'd only been out about a week when I got a job and went to work. I got hired for Lakeview Elementary in the Conley system. And so that was, we both graduated that year, him from high school and me from college. And I went to school, and Ted Jr. enrolled in MCC. And that was a whole new thing for him, and he took a part-time job at a 7-Eleven store in Robinson. And then this lovely young lady who was working at the VA Regional would stop in there 2 or 3 times a week for something. Her name was Paula. And he came home after a couple of months, and he said, "I'm going to marry Paula." Ted said, "Teddy, you're only 18 years old. You're too young to get married. You need to finish school first. And, you know, if you get married, that means you're adult." I won't pay your way for school. If you stay out and wait, finish school first and then get married, I will. Well, I don't know, but I guess when the love bug bites, so he decided that it was going to, and in December, they married. And he quit school with that semester. He only had the one semester at MCC, and went to work for Alamo Steel, loading steel and stuff in the warehouse. And he got knocked off the platform of the warehouse into the pit and broke his arm by the person running the forklift one time. So then he was stove up. But Paula was still working. And then we looked around and, Ted said, it's 7 years we've been renting here. And when we left Angelo, we kept our house. In case we didn't like it, we'd go back. I think we decided we're staying here. We need to settle down and get a home of our own. So we sold the house in San Angelo and began looking around. And we looked at the Axtell area, looked at the Elmont area. And then one of the teachers, whose wife was a professor at Baylor, said, Ted, I hear you're looking for a house. And he said, yes. He said, well, I'm wanting to sell my home. He said, it's south of Lorena, and the little division of houses called Friendly Oaks. He said, it's really nice and we like it out there, but they have a deal at Baylor that we can get a brand new house there with my wife being on faculty there, and we want to move closer so she won't have to drive at all. She can just walk to work, and won't have so far to drive to TSTI. Come and look at it and see what you think if you're looking for a place. And so we did, and Ted, having grown up out in the country and used to driving places to work, he said, I like this. It's got an acre and a half and some more empty land all around it. And it's just about 30 minutes on the interstate to work. And that's just not bad at all. What do you think? So that's when we decided that we would put down our roots at 748 Friendly Oaks, Bruceville, Texas, as the address, but it was actually about a mile south of the little town of Lorena. And that was the summer of 1975. Alicia would be a sophomore in high school the next year. Angela would be going into 6th grade. And I would check and see if they needed a teacher at Lorena. Ted's teaching career was really going well. When he first started, as I mentioned, there were only 3 teachers. And Mr. Ricketts, who taught with him, and his wife, Chloe, lived close to us, and we would often go out to dinner with them. They were some of the first friends that we made when we moved to Waco. But it didn't take long for the department to grow. First of all, they only had 1-year course, and that was basic carpentry learning. But then they added a 2nd year, which included courses like drafting and blueprint reading and business writing, things like that, which was geared for foremen and superintendents on the job. And Ted actually taught one class that was listed as CPM, which stood for Critical Path Method, which showed the person how to plan the job and get it done in a certain length of time. It was very interesting, and it's something that could be used in any part of life where you've got 30 days to do something or 50 days to do something. Plan it out, and if something happens to stop you, well, then you can do something else and get back to it and get it done in that time length. So that was a real neat course, and and well received, and even students from other classes would often want to enroll in that class for it. Ted's peers at the college elected him the first president of the Forum, which stood for Faculty Organization Resulting in Effective Management. It was a group of teachers that met and made plans, suggestions for the school. They listened to grievances that some of them had, and then they met again with the administration to go over all these things. He was also elected Outstanding Teacher in Effective Classroom Practices in 1975, and Professional Educator in 78. The school honored him also by nominating him for the Classroom Teachers of the United States, and he's in a yearbook that he's one of the outstanding teachers, and that was in 1973, all over the nation. They also nominated him for a Minnie Piper Foundation Award, which would have several $1,000s grant with it, which is a national award. He did not receive it, but he was felt real honored to be actually nominated by his school for that award. He kept on teaching, and not only did he make good things with his peers, but the students loved him. He started organizations for them, one called Beta Gamma Tau, the letters for Greek letters for BCT, standing for Building Construction Technology. And that actually worked into the very first chapter in Texas of the second year schools in VICA, which stands for Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. Their school has had the first charter, and there's a picture of Ted with two of his students that were his first officers in that VICA group. He also enjoyed working with them in that VICA program and getting them ready to represent their school at the Skills Olympics when they had the contest, often in Oklahoma or Kansas. He would get to take some outstanding students for that. He did a lot for the local schools too, because many of them classrooms were overloaded, and they were needing portable buildings to add classrooms. And so his department started building those. Framing classes would do the framing, and the plumbing classes, when they added plumbing classes, would do that. And they got them ready so that they could transfer them to other schools, and the school could get a portable building for only the cost of material. It didn't cost them any labor. So it saved the school district's money, and then they recouped the money for their labor to go back to build something else in their shop, and it didn't cost the school that. They got their money back for the materials. So that was a cost-saving thing. His department also aided the campus in that they built a barn for the livestock management department. They built greenhouses for the floriculture department. They built sidewalks and driveways for some of the places that needed that, and they built into other buildings, added classrooms where they were large buildings and they needed classrooms in the front, and they did that for their own building, and then had the shop in the back. And they began to grow from this 2 year things of just a construction to add BCM, which stood for Building Construction Masonry, and that was classes in bricklaying. And they added BCP, which was Building Construction Plumbing, and BCE, which was Building Construction Electrical, which was like those for wiring houses. When you build a house, you got to be able to wire it. And all those things were added. And Ted was program chairman of all these departments and eventually had like 21 teachers under him and anywhere from 350 to 400 students a year. And it was really flourishing. They actually grew so much that they outgrew their building. And so they had to get a new construction building, and it was, about 3 times the size of the warehouse they had used before that the Air Force had left. And when they had the dedication, Governor Mark White came up from Austin for the dedication. I know there's a picture of Ted walking with him, looking over some of the things that they had in the building. That was a great culmination for that department. And another thing they did when they had that bigger facility is they held a VICA workshop for the students that won nationally to come down and have extra training before they were going to enter the construction in cases in Australia later on. And he received a commendation for that from the National VICA. And then they also, when the federal government came in with the new OSHA laws, which was occupational safety and health laws, they started teaching that, and they taught even not only their students, but they taught at night for journeyman people of the union, other workers that wanted to come in and get certified in that OSHA. And they even did a 2-week training one summer for the 420th Battalion of U.S. Army engineers in this OSHA safety courses. Ted's teaching career was a great help to the school and to the state of Texas. The home builders themselves said once at a meeting that he had done more for the construction industry in the state of Texas than he would ever have done if he'd been the best builder all his years.